You know us. We tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. We are Legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us. We are anonymous.
What they're selling is us. They're selling our future. They're selling our past. They are selling our history, our identity, and ultimately, they are stealing our power and making our stories work for them. The entire world has changed in the last few years. It hasn't gone far enough. The problems still exist. And in some ways, they've gotten worse. But we have made progress that would not have been possible if we didn't know what was going on.
Related question, what today can the government do to your phone and your laptop, the phone and laptop of any American? What's the extent of the government's reach if they're determined to reach into your life?
We could talk about this question for hours, Brian, but we don't have time, so I'll try to summarize. Hacking has increasingly become what governments consider a legitimate investigative tool. They use the same methods and techniques as criminal hackers. And what this means is they will try to remotely take over your device. Once they do this, by detecting a vulnerability in the software that your device runs, such as Apple's iOS or Microsoft Windows, they can craft a special kind of attack code called an exploit. They then launch this exploit at the vulnerability on your device, which allows them to take total control of that device. Anything you can do on that device, the attacker, in this case the government, can do. They can read your email, they can collect every document, they can look at your contact book, they can turn the location services on, they can see anything that is on that phone instantly and send it back home to the mothership. They can do the same with laptops. The other prong that we forget so frequently is that in many cases they don't need to hack our devices. They can simply ask Google for a copy of our email box, because Google saves a copy of that. Everything that you ever typed into that search box, Google has a copy of. Every private message that you've sent on Facebook, every link that you've clicked, everything that you've liked, they keep a permanent record of. And all of these things are available not just to these companies, but to our governments, as they are increasingly deputized as sort of miniature arms of government.
What about enabling your microphone, camera?
If you can do it, they can do it. It is trivial to remotely turn on your microphone or to activate your camera, so long as you have systems level access. If you had hacked someone's device remotely, anything they can do, you can do. They can look up your nose, right? They can record what's in the room. The screen may be off as it's sitting on your desk, but the device is talking all of the time. The question we have to ask is, who is it talking to? Even if your phone is not hacked, right now, you look at it, it's just sitting there on the charger. It is talking tens or hundreds or thousands of times a minute to any number of different companies who have apps installed on your phone. It looks like it's off, it looks like it's just sitting there, but it is constantly chattering. And unfortunately, like pollution, we have not created the tools that are necessary for ordinary people to be able to see this activity. And it is the invisibility of it that makes it so popular and common and attractive for these companies. Because if you do not realize they're collecting this data from you, this very private and personal data, there's no way you're going to object to it.
What about the public attitude held by millions of everyday Americans? All I've got on a computer is pictures of my family, CCTV cameras that are prevalent in a ton of American cities and overseas capitals. Those cameras are your friend if you're innocent and have nothing to hide.
Well, I'd say that's very much what the average Chinese citizen believed, or perhaps even still to this day believes. But we see how these same technologies are being applied to create what they call the social credit system. If any of these family photos, if any of your activities online, if your purchases, if your associations, if your friends are in any way different from what the government or the powers that be of the moment would like them to be, you're no longer able to purchase train tickets. You're no longer able to board an airplane. You may not be able to get a passport. You may not be eligible for a job. You might not be able to work for the government. All of these things are increasingly being created and programmed and decided by algorithms. And those algorithms are fueled by precisely the innocent data that our devices are creating all of the time, constantly, invisibly, quietly, right now. Our devices are casting all of these records that we do not see being created, that in aggregate seem very innocent. You were at Starbucks at this time. You went to the hospital afterwards. You spent a long time at the hospital. After you left the hospital, you made a phone call. You made a phone call to your mother. You talked to her until the middle of the night. The hospital was an oncology clinic. Even if you can't see the content of these communications, the activity records, what the government calls metadata, which they argue they do not need a warrant to collect, tells the whole story. And these activity records are being created and shared and collected and intercepted constantly by companies and governments. And ultimately it means as they sell these, as they trade these, as they make their businesses on the backs of these records, what they are selling is not information. What they're selling is us. They're selling our future. They're selling our past. They are selling our history, our identity, and ultimately, they are stealing our power and making our stories work for them.
What devices do you use in your life now, and have you accepted the notion that you are watched rather constantly?
Well, probably every intelligence in the world is definitely targeting me and trying to learn anything they can, just as they did with Jamal Khashoggi, in regards to what are my plans and intentions. I try not to make that easy for them. If I get a smartphone and I need to use a phone, I actually open it up before I use it. I perform a kind of surgery on it to physically desolder or sort of melt the metal connections that hold the microphone on the phone. And I physically take this off. I remove the camera for the phone, and then I close it back up, I seal it up. And then if I need to make a phone call, I will attach an external microphone on it. And this is just so if the phone is sitting there and I'm not making a call, it cannot hear me. Now this is extreme. Most people do not need this. But for me, it's about being able to trust our technology. My phone could still be hacked. My laptop could still be hacked. And just as I told you before, the same principles apply to me. If it is hacked, they can do anything to the device that I can do. So my trust in technology is limited. But just because that's how it is today doesn't mean that's how it has to be. And a large majority of my work with the Freedom of the Press Foundation, where I serve as president of the board, is dedicated to trying to make technology more secure, to try to create programs and protocols by which we can make the communications of sources and journalists more confidential. Because if we lose the confidentiality between sources and journalists, we lose access to those essential facts that let us understand what's happening in the world. And unfortunately, under this White House, just like under the prior White House, we see the sources of very important stories that have advanced the public interest facing retaliation from a very angry government.
We thank you for watching this video and ask you to spread the news. Put this video on your social network or link to it so that you can be part of the anonymous movement. Together we are strong. Together we are anonymous.